Tonight's White House briefing didn't just get tense, it completely blew up. What started as a simple question from CNN's Kaitlan about the deaths of American service members suddenly turned into a stunning live confrontation that left Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt scrambling, deflecting, and visibly rattled. Collins kept pressing, calmly dismantling the talking points, while Leavitt lashed out at the media and tried to change the subject. The result? A moment that felt less like a press briefing and more like a political cage match, and by the end of it, the narrative the administration hoped to control was slipping fast. Stick around, because the clip you're about to see shows exactly how this fiery exchange spiraled into one of the most jaw-dropping press room showdowns we've seen in a long time.
You just mentioned that the president is going to attend the dignified transfer for these families. Given what Secretary Hegseth said this morning, is it the position of this administration that the press should not prominently cover the deaths of U.S. service members?
No, it's the position of this administration that the press in this room and the press across the country should accurately report on the success of Operation Epic Fury and the damage it is doing to the rogue Iranian regime that has threatened the lives of every single American in this room. If the Iranian regime had their choice, they would kill every single person in this room. And so we can all be very grateful that we have an administration and that we have men and women in our armed forces who are willing to sacrifice their own lives for the rest of us in this room and for every American across the country and for every troop that is based in the Middle East. That's what these...
Secretary Hegseth was complaining that it was front page news about these 6 service members who were killed.
That's not what the Secretary said, Caitlin, and that's not what the Secretary meant, and you know it. You know you are being disingenuous. There is not... We've never had a Secretary of Defense who cares more.
Drones get through or tragic things happen. It's front page news. I get it. The press only wants to make the president look bad.
Yeah,
as you know, we cover the deaths of U.S. service members under every president.
The press does only want to make the president look bad. That's a fact. Especially you. No, listen to me. Especially you and especially CNN. And the Secretary of Defense cares deeply about our war fighters and our men and women in uniform. He travels all across this country to meet with them, to connect with them, and your network has hardly ever probably reported on that. You also had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Chairman Kane, who's a brave patriot, standing alongside the Secretary at the Pentagon this morning, again expressing his condolences to these families. And I just told you that the President of the United States will be attending their dignified transfer. So please,
that's not making the president look bad. That's showcasing that.
We expect you to cover that as you should. We expect you to cover that as you should, Caitlin. But you and your network know that you take every single thing this administration says and tries to use it to make the president look bad. That is an objectable fact.
I don't think covering troop deaths is trying to make
If you're trying to argue right now that CNN's overwhelming coverage is not negative of President Donald Trump, I think the American people would tend to agree, and your ratings would tend to disagree with that as well.
The clash between Karoline Leavitt and Kaitlan Collins during that White House press briefing was more than just another tense exchange between a press secretary and a reporter. It was a revealing snapshot of how modern political communication works when pressure, messaging, and accountability collide in real time. What began as a straightforward question about the deaths of American service members quickly spiraled into a confrontation that exposed the deep mistrust between political power and the media. Collins asked a question that, in any functioning democracy, should be routine. When American troops die during a military operation, should that be major news? Instead of addressing the substance of the issue, the loss of life, the circumstances surrounding the operation, and the administration's response, Leavitt pivoted almost immediately into a broader critique of the press itself. Her argument was clear. The media, particularly CNN, focuses on negative narratives about the president and intentionally frames events to make the administration look bad. But in doing so, the conversation shifted away from the original topic and toward a familiar political battleground, the credibility of the media versus the credibility of the administration. What made the moment so striking was the contrast in approach. Collins continued pressing the original point, trying to clarify whether the administration believed reporting on fallen service members was somehow inappropriate or unfair coverage. Meanwhile, Leavitt framed the question as evidence of media hostility. That rhetorical shift is a common strategy in political communication. Rather than debating the facts directly, redirect the conversation toward the motives of the person asking the question. By accusing journalists of bias, officials can attempt to discredit uncomfortable questions before they are fully answered. In this exchange, Leavitt went further, directly accusing CNN of systematically trying to damage the president's reputation. It was an aggressive move that transformed a policy discussion into a media war inside the briefing room. But the deeper issue underlying the confrontation was narrative control. Governments, regardless of party, try to shape how events are interpreted by the public. In this case, the administration appeared eager to emphasize the success of the military operation and the threat posed by Iran while downplaying the political fallout of American casualties. Collins' question cut directly into that messaging strategy. By focusing on the human cost of the operation, she forced the briefing to address the aspect of the story that political messaging often tries to sideline. The tension we saw was the friction created when those two agendas collide, the government attempting to maintain a strategic narrative and a journalist attempting to push past it. Another striking element of the exchange was how quickly the discussion turned personal. Instead of keeping the conversation focused on policy or facts, Leavitt singled out Collins and her network directly, accusing them of bad faith. Moments like this reveal how political communication has evolved in the age of viral clips and social media. Press briefings are no longer just informational events. They are also performances designed for audiences far beyond the room. When an official clashes with a journalist on camera, that moment can instantly circulate across the internet, energizing supporters and reinforcing existing political narratives. For some viewers, Leavitt's confrontation with Collins will look like a forceful defense against hostile media. For others, it will look like an attempt to dodge accountability. The same clip can reinforce two completely different interpretations, depending on the audience's political perspective. There is also a broader institutional story here. The relationship between the White House and the press has always involved tension, but in recent years that tension has intensified dramatically. Political leaders increasingly treat major news organizations not simply as critics, but as adversaries. When Leavitt accused CNN of wanting to make the president look bad, she was echoing a message that has become central to many modern political strategies. If the media reports something damaging, the problem is not the event itself, but the bias of the people reporting it. This approach can be politically effective because it shifts the debate away from facts and toward trust. If supporters believe the media cannot be trusted, then negative coverage can be dismissed before it even begins to influence public opinion. Yet Collins' persistence during the exchange demonstrated another important dynamic. Journalists in the briefing room often act as the last line of direct questioning available to the public. Press secretaries speak on behalf of the administration, but reporters have the role of challenging those statements and pressing for clarification. The tension between those roles is built into the structure of democratic governance. When it works properly, that tension produces information and accountability. When it breaks down, it turns into a shouting match about motives and credibility, which is essentially what happened in this case. What viewers ultimately saw was a moment where two competing narratives collided in real time. On one side was an administration attempting to frame the story around national security, military success, and media hostility. On the other side was a journalist insisting that the deaths of American service members deserve scrutiny and explanation. Neither side was willing to concede the framing of the issue, and the result was a confrontation that quickly escalated beyond the original question. In many ways, the viral nature of this moment reflects the current political environment itself. Political communication has become faster, sharper, and more theatrical, partly because the audience is no longer limited to the reporters in the room. Every exchange is potentially a viral clip, every disagreement a headline, every raised voice a social media moment. The clash between Leavitt and Collins fits perfectly into that ecosystem. It wasn't just a briefing exchange, it was a moment of political theater that instantly became content for commentators, analysts, and viewers trying to interpret what it means about power, accountability, and the role of the press. And that's why moments like this resonate so strongly with audiences. They reveal the tension beneath the polished surface of official messaging. When the script breaks and the conversation becomes confrontational, viewers get a rare glimpse of how information is contested at the highest levels of government. The Leavitt-Collins clash was one of those moments, a reminder that the battle over political narratives isn't just fought in speeches or campaign ads, but sometimes right there in the briefing room, live on camera, where every word matters and every response can shape how the public understands what is really happening behind the scenes.